Okay, let's go over your profile story, which will be due in 2 weeks. It's, as you can see, due Sunday, June 23rd. So it's basically just before Monday the 24th. It's worth 100 points, just like your hard news story. You will write a profile story. You must write about an interesting person, and it cannot be a close family member or friend. So here's what I don't want. Brother, sister, mom, dad, your roommate, your best friend since you were 5. Look, I'm not always going to be able to figure it out. I know you could try to pull a fast one on Professor Chiara, but try not to. I want you to stretch yourself a little bit. Now, I say ideally it should be someone you do not know at all, or it can just be an acquaintance. Let me give you an example of what you could do. Let's say your best friend is in a band. So don't cover your best friend, but maybe you could cover a bandmate in there. So you might have known that person. Maybe you've seen them at parties, talked to them a few times. That's okay. Excuse me. That's okay. But you can cover them, but you don't really know them that well. Or here's where I bent exceptions before. Someone says, Professor Chiara, I have an uncle or an aunt. She lives in Washington, D.C. I'm actually thinking of an example right now of one. She lives in Washington, D.C. She's worked for the FBI for years. I see her every 3 years at some wedding or something, but I don't really know her that well. Okay, I let you do that. I know it's a family member, but you don't have that close of a connection. That's what I'm looking for. Or you can do a totally random person. And let me give you an example of one that sticks in my mind. A student got coffee every morning, on her way to work or wherever she was going to school. And there was the same they're at a convenience store, and the ssame convenience store worker that she always used to say hi to. So she decided to do it on him. She said, hey, I'm doing this class project. Would you mind if I think, I just interviewed you and just wrote about your story. And the guy had a great story. It was, he came from another country. He had, I wish I remember all the details now, but, he has all these challenges and struggles. And it was just like a really great story. And so I think sometimes you find those gems too by just kind of going outside your comfort zone. And she was very glad that she wrote the story. So I say that I don't want you going for someone close. I'm going to take your word for it that you're going to stretch yourself a little bit. Here's another reason that you should do that. It's also, you're probably going to get a better story out of it, a better written story. And you would think that's kind of counterintuitive. Yeah, but I know that person. The problem is if you think you know somebody, you might not ask certain questions because you think you already know that, or you have some assumptions, right? And you might not ask these, or that person might not feel as comfortable maybe telling you that because maybe they don't want to tell you something like that. It also goes back from the reading, the books, your bias, right? You automatically have bias towards this person because you know them and you like them, right? So by kind of going to someone that you don't know a lot about, it forces you to ask questions and you get some really good answers, or you might learn things that you wouldn't have asked if it was somebody that you knew really well, right? You would maybe not think that you need to ask that, and you wouldn't find out maybe something really interesting. So it's going to make your story better. I think you'll be happy to do it, but do not get somebody that's really close to you. When in doubt, message me. If you're not sure about somebody, hey, I have an aunt that does X, Y, and Z. Message me, and I'll say, nah, I bet you could find somebody else. Or yeah, that's a great one. Okay. Just like before, write it in a Word document. Do not put it right on a blackboard. Here's what your story must have. Must not use reporting from other stories or use direct language from other stories, just like your hard news story. So maybe it is somebody that has been covered in the media before. So don't, you're not, what I don't want you to do is take that article and just take sections from it, or take reporting that was done in that article. It's supposed to be original to you. It's okay if they've been covered by other media outlets, but you should not be taking anything from there. Have at least 4 direct quotes that you obtain. The quotes must be recorded by you and original to your reporting. So let me give you one that students have made mistakes in the past so we really understand. These are all quotes that you got from talking to this person in your conversation. It cannot be from their website. I've gotten this before. Students have a quote from the website, a quote. I'm like, oh, that looks kind of strange. I go to their website and it's right there on the website about that person. You can't take those. Those are not original to your reporting. It has to be from your conversation. You can use quotes from their website or from other things if, as additional, but it can't be one of the 4 direct quotes that you got from them. So you gotta get quotes, is what I'm telling you. Between 650 and 750 words. Have short paragraphs, and I haven't graded your hard news stories yet, so I don't know how well we did on this, but this is one that students struggle with. Remember, paragraphs are very short. 1 to 3 sentences, 5 at the most. If you count more than 5 sentences in your paragraph, I guarantee you can break it up. 1 to 3 sentences. Anytime there's a new thought, make it a new paragraph, right? Anytime there's like a new thought. So here's my example. Professor Chiara teaches at the University of Hartford. He's been teaching for over 5 years. He started his career working in journalism and media. He's worked for several different media organizations. All right, those were 4 sentences. They were all kind of related, right, about my background. You should have broken it up, though, because there was a new thought in there. The new thought was my past career before teaching. So I said, and now I don't remember exactly what I said, but Professor Chiara teaches at the University of Hartford. He's been teaching for over 5 years. That's one thought. That's one related thought. New paragraph. So those are my first 2 sentences. New paragraph. You know, he worked in the media before, blah, 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 blah. He worked at these places. That's a new paragraph, right? I know they're kind of related, right? But they're different thoughts. So when in doubt, break it up. That's what I like to think. When in doubt, break it up. It is okay to have 1 2-sentence paragraphs. In fact, you should. And a lot of times 1-sentence paragraphs bring emphasis to a point. So make sure that you're breaking those up. And the book talks about that, I know, but this is a mistake that students often make. Has to be written in the 3rd person. This is another big one. So you should not be writing I or we in there. I had lunch with so-and-so. We talked about this. I really found it interesting that this person, it's 3rd person. So-and-so, you know, you're just talking about that person, right? You are not a part of the story at all. You are just focusing on that person. The line I like is, you are a narrator, not a main character. You should not be in that story at all. And don't try to get cute either. This is what some people try to do. They say, this journalist had a lunch with blah, blah, blah. The person told this journalist, yes, that is 3rd person, I guess, or, you know, but it's still putting you in the story. Don't put yourself in the story at all. Take a look at the Washington Post one actually isn't a good example because they use themselves in the story, but you got to know the rules to break the rules. But for this one, we're doing it very traditional, very classic way you write a profile feature story. You are not a part of the story at all. You're just emphasizing that person in their story. All right, so here's what I'm grading on. How well defined is the focus? You're going to learn about what the focus is in your chapter, in the chapter that you got to read. How well is this theme presented throughout the story? Again, in your chapter, all this is from your chapter, but from the chapter you're going to read, but I'm looking for that. If background information is presented strategically, so you obviously have to give some background information. I'm looking kind of, what I mean by strategically is, well, where did you put it? Did you put it in the right places? Did you overload it in the front? Did you just save it all for the end, which isn't good either? It has to be, you know, sprinkled in throughout, so I'm looking for that. If the writing is clear, concise, and informative, the quality of quotes, the information you got from your interview. All right, so let's talk about that. Just because you have 4 quotes in your story does not make it an A, does not make it that you did it perfectly. I'm looking for interesting quotes that are really the spice of the story. So here's an example of a bad quote. If you interview me and you say, you know, the quote is, I grew up in Bethel, Connecticut. And that's what you use as a quote for me. I grew up in Bethel, Connecticut. That's not a good quote because you could have just written that. You could have just said, Adam Chiara grew up in Bethel, Connecticut. Right? And gotten that same piece of information. That's a quote. Remember, quotes are like the spices of the story that would make it interesting. Now, what maybe you could have said is, yeah, growing up in Bethel is a great experience because you're close enough to New York where you get to have a little bit of city life, but then you come and you're in the suburbs and you get to run around in the woods. That gives that's a little bit more spice. It's a little bit more interesting, right? Now I'm picturing Bethel. I'm picturing you're picturing my childhood, right? So that's more of a quote that you're going to use. So not that every quote has to be earth-shattering, but you should be thinking when you're doing a quote, is this something I could just say about this person? Or is this something that I kind of have to hear from them that makes it more interesting because it's coming from them? That the Washington Post article that I shared that you're going to be reading this week, you'll see the interesting quotes that they use. Okay. How well the goal method was used, you're going to learn that in the chapter. If turning points were addressed, again, in the chapter. AP style. So again, I have not seen your exercise that you turned in yet. You're going to be getting that this week. Take a look at the feedback I give you there. Take a look at the feedback I give you in your hard news story about AP mistakes that you might have made. But now you're starting to get AP a little bit more. You've done a couple exercises. You've gone through a round of your hard news story. You've gotten critique from me. I'm going to be really looking for it. If you're making, again, those very simple AP mistakes, they're careless errors, and that's what's going to hurt you. So AP style is not lost just because you did it last week. Now you're going to be building on that. How well the lessons from the chapters are being applied. So you definitely hit, these are lessons that you're getting from this chapter, but there's still other lessons from past chapters I want you to apply. Short paragraphs, like we talked about, right? Is it written in third person? Quotes, like we talked about, picking interesting quotes. Yeah, how well did you interview the person? Like those are the kinds of things that I'm still looking for that are building on in this class. And of course, is it free of spelling or grammar errors? Okay, so this is due within 2 weeks. You don't have to message me with who you're interviewing. I should say whom you're interviewing, but you can if you just want to be certain, or if you want to get an idea, or if you're really not sure what to do. Message me and we can talk about it. As always, any questions about this assignment, or you're not sure about something, make sure you read the chapter first. You should not start this until you've read the chapter. I take that back. You can start to interview the person. I think you'll be the most effective, though, if you read the chapters first, you read that Washington Post story, then you have a really good grasp of how to write this. Then I think you'll be the most effective if you go down and interview the person and start to write this story. But I say that kind of hesitant because I don't want you to wait a week and a half to get this done, right? You should read the chapters as soon as possible so you know how you should approach this and find that person to interview, so you can get that interview done this week. Ideally, I know not everybody's schedule works this way. If this was a perfect role for you, if you can try to manage your time, read those chapters and get all the reading done within the first few days. So by Wednesday, get everything read at least, right? Then you can go interview someone by the end of the week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you have next week to write this. So first week you have everything read, interview the person, next week you can write it. I think that's probably a good management if you're able to do that. All right, but let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to reading this too.